All right. Well, I'm super excited to have this conversation with you guys today. We're going to dive right in as we watch the clock. We've seen the creative industry evolve many times through technology. Early days of photography to digital cinematics. Each time there's a little bit of stress for the human, right? Of like, well, what do I do now? But what we've really seen happen is careers have evolved. Roles in the workforce have been created. And, we find that differentiation for the creative to continue to add value. Now we're in one of the biggest so far of those shifts with Agentic AI. And both of you have great experience kind of on both sides of the technology, the marketer experience. So we're going to dive into that conversation. I think, first of all, just so that people get to know who you are, would appreciate you each giving an introduction, just briefly about your role, and then share one way that Agentic AI is actively changing the way you or your teams work.
I'm Ash King. I lead Firefly Enterprise Solutions. So Firefly Enterprise, we hear Firefly all the time. We're the ones that work with actually implementing real creative AI solutions with customers. So I like to play my role as a pessimistic optimist. And I think it's just like perfect for this era. I mean, Paul de la Roche said, painting is dead back when the daguerreotype was invented. But then suddenly photography became a massive, creative outlet and storytelling venue. We went through Photoshop. We've gone through all these changes. So it's been my pleasure to work with customers from early use cases where we're just generating tons of content and then realizing that when you unlock that scale, the quality is the issue. And then moving from that to automated workflows and now agentic, where we can actually kind of convey the taste through that process and help with the scale.
Hi, everyone. My name is Heather Kerberg. I am the Director of Advertising Services at Amazon Ads. You can think of my org as comprised of many different teams that are helping our advertisers be successful post-sale. So for managed service advertisers, that means that we're doing everything white glove, from the creative delivery to the campaign management, to the trafficking, to the optimizations, to the reporting, etc. And then we also have teams that are simply and purely here to support our self-service advertisers to be successful. So as you kind of think about that workflow, there's mechanical complexity at every turn and every handoff, and we're seeing that Agentic AI is really removing a lot of that complexity. But I would say the sharpest example is in the creative space. So I have a creative services team who are producing creative for advertisers all day long, and that line between purpose and tact, like the mechanical aspects of building those campaigns has really changed quite a bit. So.
Awesome. You guys have sort of started to bring up a tension here between tools that are genuinely powerful in your space and brand identities, right? Like brand identities that take time to nurture. They require human judgment. They should be long-term things. And so, from your perspective, where does the human control have to stay in these sort of creative processes? And where can we start to let go a little bit and let the tools own those tasks or that work?
I can jump in here. I hear about this tension all day long, both from the advertisers that my team is supporting, as well as our designers that are actually doing the creative work. And what advertisers say, is that they want full control of that brand identity, the look, the feel, the messaging, but the weight around that production, they don't necessarily want to deal with. And, that's where the distinction is the most important. Humans are creating that creative direction, and then our agentic AI tools are really making it fast. I like to think that our agents make production fast, but our creative professionals ensure that it's right. Right for the audience, right for the brand, right for the objective of the campaign.
Totally, that makes sense. kind of the human QA.
Yeah, like making
Okay.
sure that what it's producing is exactly on brand.
Yeah, sure. What about you, Ash?
Well, we've been working with brands on that concept of what is brand? Like, how do we break down brand? How do we convey it in an intelligent way into a workflow? You know, at first we started with brand guidelines, bringing those in and then using those to drive quality checks and workflows. But over time, I've started to just think about it. What are the fundamentals? If you want to have automated scale, you got to have assets, centralized, accessible, and managed. You have to have your ways of working and processes at least understood within the teams. But connecting all of that together is the context of the brand, which is like 80% intangible. It's in everybody's heads. It's in all the teams working together. So our big journey now has been taking that context and helping to capture it through the actual review annotations, the way that people work with each other to help tie all of those elements so that when you automate a workflow, that QA element has learned to look at the outputs like somebody on your team would and give you the specific guidance back as to why it made the decisions that it did. But I think, you know, ultimately creatives are going to pick the tools, brands are going to pick the tools that make sense. I had one brand where I walked in and was wondering why they didn't want to do these great workflows that we were creating. I had to go sit next to somebody's workstation and actually talk through, like, what are you doing? And then it was an epiphany. They just don't trust the tool yet. So how do we make sure that everybody has the visibility into what it can do, how it operates?
And I think allowing them to be part of that process builds that trust as well, which is, you know, a flywheel of benefit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's really important to move from like the practice to detailing like the challenge. Like, let's dig in, let's talk about how it's happening, which I appreciate you guys sharing. And your point of sitting right in with that builder, chatting with them, it's like, that's really what it takes. Like, the design really needs to be right next to a user and really starting to understand blockers. As much as technology changes, it's people that also need to change it and come along as well. So I think that's like excellent for a leader to really be like hands in and willing to see that work with them. I heard a cool stat, so I figured I would prepare for you guys with some data. That's the Amazonian way. And what I've learned is for a creative, for every hour of actual like creative production work, there's 3 hours of additional maintenance or admin. So that's like spec changes, format conversions, legal and PR approval processes, etc., brand compliance, all those things. And it sounds like from your example, Heather, those are the types of things that tools or technology can do. And so now that frees up 3 out of 4 hours of a creative's day, right? So when you think about that shift, you know, how would you say that principled human AI collaboration actually look like in your workflows today? When your builder now has 3 more hours, what would you love to see or know that they're doing?
Well, I like to think of it as everything is human-led. So humans lead and the agentic processes follow, execute, and help to make people more productive in these areas that aren't really valuable in their workday in terms of storytelling and actually crafting that experience. I was just at a brand 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about what good looks like for them to actually implement an intelligent workflow. And they said, well, I'd love our designers to actually go home and not work weekends. And I said, well, what are they doing? Like, what most of their time, what are they doing? Resizing, cropping, you know. That's the things that, yes, they're valuable for a designer to do, but that's prime material for agentic processes, especially if it understands how all of these elements come together from the context.
I think a great example of where I've seen my team leaning in with this AI human collaboration is with our creative products. You know, so they're spending less time on the mechanics of every campaign, which gives them more time to actually make our products great. Like leveraging our products, we call it dog fooding our creative products, and then circling that feedback right through back to product. So we found that very effective. We also have a very effective partnership with companies like Adobe, where it's a collaboration leveraging the same infrastructure, Adobe's tools, our team's creative expertise, paired with Agentic AI to really be powerful. And so, as an example, I think it was late last year, 2025, we built 300 professional templates that are built to Amazon's specs and policies, and then we partnered with Adobe Express to make those available to their, millions and millions of monthly followers. And we've seen a real impact. I think the rough stat is about 16% of our campaigns are now leveraging those creative templates. So I think that's allowing advertisers who maybe didn't have access to quality creative before actually start to unlock that potential. And so I expect that we'll be able to see more advertisers really taking advantage of this opportunity.
And that's interesting that you were talking about the tools that they're using. And I think click in on that is great, because it's always about the right tool. I mean,
that's right.
If you're doing something with generative AI, what matters to be accurate? What matters less? That you can, have something that's on brand. I'm assuming that with an Echo Dot, if you're placing it on a counter in, a faded background, that background is not as important as the accuracy of the Echo Dot. Whereas another furniture retailer, for example, might care more about the background than what's in front. So always picking the right tools, understanding how they work. Are you using digital twins? Are you using generative? Are you using other capabilities? And how do those intersect?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ash, I loved your point about everything being human-led. And Heather, obviously I'm familiar with the dog fooding, but I think it's really cool when you're saying, hey, we built templates and then we put it in the hands of customers, right? So there's this great opportunity to shorten the learning curve or speed things up, help allow people to even the playing field, and they don't now have to figure out how to make the right ads for Amazon. So I just think that's an awesome customer forward idea from you guys.
I will emphasize though, self-service it doesn't mean that humans aren't involved. In addition to helping our creative products, our designers are also really ensuring that infrastructure is sound. And so there's a lot more value that they feel like they can bring with, this additional, 3 hours?
3 hours.
3 hours back.
I don't know. I'm going to poll my team. My design team seems to always be at capacity, but I love that for us and for them. So, all right. So we've talked about some disruptions that have happened: photography, desktop publishing, Photoshop. And so, when you look at the end, human creative work ended up expanding, like we talked about earlier. But, that's not an inevitable outcome. That really comes from adaptation, the idea and interest to learn and evolve from individuals. And so there's a window for a deliberate choice to be made of I'm curious, I'm going to go figure this thing out, or maybe not. And I think right now is that window for agentic AI in marketing and branding and many other industries represented here. So I want to maybe ask my last question here, something a little bit forward-looking from you guys. So 1 year from now, I hope that we're all back at Cannes. This is my first Cannes, and it's beautiful.
Isn't it fun?
I'm having quite a time. So 1 year from now, maybe the three of us will be chatting here again. What signal will tell you that our industry is really getting this one right?
Do you want me to jump in? Okay. Well, there'll be a few, I bet. But one signal probably goes back to my last response, which is I think we'll see more advertisers unlocking, potential through creative that we're not seeing today. So that should be exciting. And I also think the value of the human in this loop of AI is going to be even more clear. we were just talking about the series of cans that we've had over the last 3 years. And the first one 3 years ago was really about AI is going to take all of our jobs, and now I think it's really calmed down to humans and AI have to coexist together, and it will be more powerful as a result. And so I think, it's not about humans or machines. It's about giving our designers and our creative professionals the right tools so they're spending less time on friction and more time on imagination. I heard yesterday an analogy where we're essentially just giving our creatives, it's like giving Michelangelo a better paintbrush. We're just improving the tools that they have to work with. So those are the signals. And then I think performance will ultimately be the true signal of if we're getting AI creative right.
That's great. Just building on that, because I think you're spot on. 2 years ago, everybody here was talking about what is it? Last year, people were saying, how can we use it? And this year, everybody's saying, prove it. Prove it to me now, and then I'll talk to you. And so that narrows that window as to what we can do. What does the proof mean? What matters to the brands? And I think that what the signal is next year is that creativity feels more human, not less. It's something where you are really thinking about your career choices as a positive and not going home and thinking, what did I do with my day? And the net effect is, as all of this content scales, the humans in the loop are not in the loop. They're leading. They're actually storytelling and crafting experiences that are going to differentiate the brands that invest in that capability for the creatives. So from Adobe's standpoint, that's like nirvana for us. All we want to do is empower creatives. So I think that signal is more human, not less, and that we aren't using AI in a synthetic way. We're using it to amplify that creativity, to operationalize it, and to make sure that there are connecting points for all the personas that need to have access to that creativity.
I think, you both have this common thread of like feeding creativity or enabling the dreamer to actually make those dreams reality, right? Like, I think we all have ideas that we kind of like write down or don't write down, but you forget about. And like with the tools and technology, you get one step closer to seeing a version of your idea, right? And so I think as people just get the fulfillment of that experience, hopefully that like unlocks a lot more creativity and execution and campaigns and things that like consumers or customers really get to experience.
Yeah, you just reminded me, I'm an Instagram junkie, just so you know. Like all of my friends' gifts come from Instagram ads. It reads my mind. But there's this great outdoor performer who just puts a keyboard out and he has, just colored tape on it and says, come up. I want you to push this note and then push that note and just keep doing that. And then he will play the chords. He has the beat. He'll sing a song. And that person is actually taking this harmonic theme throughout the song. And you can see people open up. They just start to go, wait a minute, I'm doing something here. I'm contributing to this experience. And it's just, I love that part of it. So from a creative standpoint in these workflows, creatives get all the juice. They get all the, but there are a lot of other people's marketers. There are people on the front lines who need to communicate with customers. Those roles and personas also need the same tools.
Yeah, that's excellent. I think maybe because we have a little time, I'm going to throw in a twist question because that's my style. I don't know. So we talked about the future and how we'll know we're getting things right. There's also some data around customers have a different response when they realize an ad has been AI generated. And sometimes that response is not good, not positive. And so are there some examples that stand out to you all where either a company has gotten it wrong or an ad really got it wrong and it's just an opportunity to learn from your teams? I think we'll learn from our wins, but we also learn from our failures, right? Where we say fail is first attempt in learning. Is there an example that you guys can share that you've observed, not necessarily in your own companies, but that...
Yeah, I won't use any names, but I have an 11-year-old who is very tech savvy, and he can spot an AI song before I even know what's playing. And so I think we have to remember that even our young generation is so in tune with AI now that it's very obvious when there is no human judgment involved in the creative process, whether it's the creative direction or what have you. And so that's just one example that just recently happened where I'm like, how do you know that it's AI? And he went on and on to explain, his process for identifying that kind of thing. And so I just think, we hear from advertisers all the time, they don't want AI touching their creative. They want it to be authentic. They want it to be true to their brand identity. And they truly do not want us using AI. And so I think this will also be an evolution of building that trust so that there's more appetite for, incorporating it into the workflow, but not necessarily letting it take over the entire output.
Yeah, I think the phrase, my dad phrase that I use all the time is the world is divided into people who think they're right. But it's also divided into people who understand the difference between creative AI and generative AI and how to apply it, and people who don't. If I walk into a brand and I'll talk to people and ask them, what is the most authentic part of your brand or the message that you're trying to bring across? What needs to be true? And if the team can't answer that question, I'm worried. I'm worried that they're going to get it wrong. If it's a grocer, you want probably to have a real orange, but the background doesn't matter, just like with the Echo Dot. But people who, I guess, don't think, for example, like you said, that people can tell the difference, you're going to trip up. Always understand what is the most authentic elements that need to be conveyed. They have to be protected. You have to be able to audit that we're actually going through those processes, because I'm sure your team doesn't do everything that goes out. Sometimes you're getting hero imagery from other sources, all of that. How do you know the provenance of all of that? That's also a key.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for sharing. I think it's good just to hear, how we're learning in real time. So I appreciate those examples. So as we're kind of wrapping up here, I think every conversation we've had, we talk about brand, purpose, identity, and how you're really balancing that amongst the tooling and just the powerful rate of change that we're experiencing. And I think it naturally circles back to what's left for us to do, right? And I appreciate you all kind of saying, maybe that's not where we should focus. And instead, really, this shift isn't about us stepping aside to let something else do our work, but it's really asking us to get clearer about, what we actually bring to the table, the taste, the judgment, understanding those brand elements, what are the truths that must always be consistent, and really being able to clearly articulate that. And kind of everyone in the team needs to be able to, because everyone in the team will be touching the tools or potentially approving or getting work out the door. So I think that really, really folks will realize what matters most is our understanding and our ability to influence, lead, as you were saying earlier. So I think that's really great. I think we need to know which parts we should always hold on to and really own as the business owners, et cetera, in our teams. I think maybe to wrap up, I think the key part of being successful here is the human element. And so that's what we've talked about. And so I'll ask you, how would you describe the human element that you empower your team to bring each day? What's that presence?
I mean, you said it, right? You can't teach AI taste or judgment or curiosity or the courage to take a creative risk. That's where the human is the most valuable. So that's how I would kind of summarize that.
Yeah, and I think that's where the human is most valuable. And I think we get in our own way of holding on to ways of doing things or tools that block us from getting to that deep space. I'm going to age myself, but you can see the gray in my beard. I did hand typesetting, and then I moved to other forms, digital forms of typesetting. And even at that time, which I'm just doing rave posters,
Yeah.
I was just putting something on, background. But once I had a tool that got rid of that manual piece that took most of my time, I had ideas. I realized I had ideas that I could convey, and I could really start to craft messaging going forward. I think every time we get a new tool, we're worried that it's going to take something away from us. But sometimes that thing that it's going to take away from us isn't the essence of what we can bring to this.
Yeah, I try to talk to my team. So today I kind of have a design team, engineering team, etc. And I talk about like calibrated collaboration. This is what it will take. Everyone's nervous, a little bit scared, right? I'm a product manager by background, and what's that job going to be soon? I don't know. But I'm committed to the calibrated collaboration that needs to happen. And so great to hear you guys are really imparting that in your teams. So I just really want to thank you guys as the panelists, being really honest and sharing real examples, real things happening in your worlds, at home with your 11-year-old and in the office. And, thinking out loud with us, and really to the audience for caring enough about this work and really trying to learn what's actually happening on the ground in these big organizations right now, as we're all experiencing the same change management in people, tools, technology. So thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.